This is Left Voices for Wednesday, April 2nd, 2014. I'm Andrea Sears. Tonight,
more and more the rich and the powerful, because of their money, are able to dominate our elections and our politics, and it's moving further and further away from the promise of democracy.
the Supreme Court opens the floodgates for wealthy donors in federal elections. In a 5-4 majority ruling, the Supreme Court today struck down limits on aggregate spending in elections for federal office, a ruling that is destined to flood campaigns with huge donations from wealthy individuals. The 2010 Citizens United ruling allowed corporate interests to pump unlimited amounts of cash into election campaigns, mostly through undisclosed contributions to political action committees. But Citizens United money can only go to outside groups. Now, with their ruling in McCutcheon versus the Federal Elections Commission, the conservative majority of the court has once again equated money with speech and ruled that individuals must be allowed to contribute huge sums to candidates, political parties, and committees. The current cap of $2,600 from an individual to a candidate in primary and general elections remains in place. But the ruling eliminates the $123,300 limit on combined contributions. Wealthy donors can now contribute to as many candidates as they want, and they could give multi-million-dollar checks to joint fundraising committees formed by political party leaders.
The impact of this ruling is to exacerbate the problem of big money forces dominating our elections and drowning out the voices of ordinary citizens.
John Bonifaz is co-founder and president of Free Speech for People, a group that is fighting to overturn the Citizens United decision.
This sharply divided Supreme Court has threatened our democracy again. As in Citizens United, we see a court that continues to ignore the danger that's posed by big money forces in our elections, undermining the integrity of our democracy and undermining the fundamental promise of political equality for all. And we must respond to this court ruling as we have been engaged in responding to the Citizens United ruling, which is the continued push for a constitutional amendment to overturn the court on this critical question and to reclaim our democracy.
How does this change federal law for fundraising by individual candidates?
Well, essentially now what candidates can do is allow for a fundraising committee of a political party or of an elected official to gather literally millions of dollars from single donors. So whereas before the aggregate contribution limits for an individual donor in the United States was $123,000 in a 2-year election cycle, now a single donor can literally write a check for $5.9 million to a fundraising committee controlled by a political party or an elected official. And that will make it even more possible for the mega rich in this nation to dominate our elections and to have a disproportionate influence on not just the outcomes, but the policies that are set by our government. This is becoming more and more a plutocracy, not a democracy.
This applies across the board now. So in an election cycle, an individual could give huge amounts of money to several candidates across state lines in multiple elections.
That's correct. I mean, basically this allows very wealthy individuals, millionaires and billionaires, to now engage in distributing their contributions in a far greater way across the nation to dominate our election cycle. And the whole idea with the aggregate contribution limits is that we did not want wealthy individuals to undermine the existing direct contribution limits for candidates going directly to donors and how much they can give directly to one campaign. But an individual can now write a $5.9 million check to one committee and allow that money to be distributed to various candidate campaigns. It essentially undercuts the whole idea of limiting how much an individual can give, because it allows for this both appearance of corruption and actual corruption to occur, And equally important, it undermines this promise of political equality for all. The vast majority of people in this country don't have $5.9 million to give to any candidates. And that's what's going to happen, is we're going to enter into another phase in which more and more the rich and the powerful, because of their money, are able to dominate our elections and our politics, and it's moving further and further away from the promise of democracy.
What are the venues at this point to counteract this, or are there any?
The most important focus has to be on overturning the Supreme Court with a constitutional amendment. We do need many other reforms, and we ought to be pushing for those as well, like public funding of elections and greater transparency and shareholder accountability with respect to corporate political expenditures. But we have to have the bold vision and the broad vision to go forward and say it's time to amend the Constitution, to overturn the Supreme Court, restore the authority of Congress and the states to allow for regulation of our money and our politics, and essentially to reclaim our democracy. And that's what's been happening since the Citizens United ruling, and the McCutcheon ruling will only further fuel this fast-growing movement in the country for a constitutional amendment to overturn the court and reclaim our democracy.
Well, what's the status of that movement right now? Have there been bills introduced? Have they gotten a hearing?
There have been a number of amendment bills introduced in Congress. There's one amendment bill in the Senate, Senator Udall's amendment bill, which has 29 co-sponsors, has the most traction in the Senate. Its companion amendment bill is Congressman Jim McGovern's amendment bill in the House. But beyond that, there's been a large and growing movement in the country, in the states. 16 states are now on record calling for a constitutional amendment, demanding action out of Congress, 500-plus cities and towns. The President of the United States has gone on record as well, along with 145 members of Congress. So within 4 years since the Citizens United ruling, this movement has grown significantly. I think we're going to see out of the McCutcheon ruling even further movement and growth because of the danger that the court poses to our republic.
What about the Supreme Court? We now have an ideological court. It is sharply divided, as you said, and it is overturning decades, if not sometimes centuries, of precedent.
Well, I think that there's no question that this court has to be called into check, and the process by which we do that and have historically done that is the amendment process. That is why we have the power under Article 5 of the Constitution to amend the Constitution, and we've done it before in our nation's history. 7 of the 27 amendments have overturned prior Supreme Court rulings, egregious rulings of the court. This will go down in history as one of those rulings that will require an amendment, and I think that we will get there. The people will demand their democracy back and will not allow a 5-justice majority to effectively destroy it. And that's the threat we face today, and we have a choice. Is it we the people, or is it we the corporations and the big money forces? And I think we the people will rise.
John Bonifaz is co-founder and president of Free Speech for People. This has been Left Voices for Wednesday, February 2nd, 2014. You can help support this experiment in independent journalism by visiting our website at www.leftvoices.net and following the Ways to Support Left Voices link at the top of the page. Join us again tomorrow for more news and information from a progressive perspective. I'm Andrea Sears for leftvoices.net.